Let's learn about one special type of layer that's available in Photoshop called adjustment layer. Now, adjustment layer is able to manipulate or change the visibility of certain settings by affecting the layers underneath it, but without manipulating or destroying the original pixels. What that means is basically I can apply some sort of a filter like how we do with Instagram without actually changing the original footage. Let's see how that works out. To create an adjustment layer, there are two variations of doing this. One, I can do it the regular style, which is going from the menu bar and opening up the layer panel, where I have something called new adjustment layer. And the other way to do the same thing is from the layers panel. In the layers panel, you can see that there is a small icon right over here, some sort of a half-baked cookie that if you click on is able to give you certain types of different adjustment layers. We'll go through each of these. To maintain sanctity of how we've been doing it, let's understand to do this directly from the menu bar. Now under layer, let me go to new adjustment layer and see the different types of options there are. Now I see three different sections over here. The first one has brightness, levels, curves and exposure. That's primarily about the lighting of an image. The second one is for vibrance, hue, color, black and white, photo filter, channel mixer and color lookup. That's largely to do with the colors of the photo or of the image. And the third one is invert, posterize, threshold, gradient and selective colors. These are some artistic filters that we'll also see. Now we'll go through all of these in detail over across the next set of videos, but let's see how an adjustment layer works first. For doing that, let me create a new adjustment layer with brightness and contrast. Now you probably already know how brightness and contrast works. When I increase the brightness, the image becomes more whiter, and when I increase the contrast, there is higher difference between the lights and the darks. So that's how this works. Let me undo this and set it all to 0. And when I create adjustment layer, there's a new layer that got created over here as how we had expected. Now you can see that this looks very similar to the layer mask. That basically means this layer is affecting the brightness and contrast of the layer underneath it by changing the colors over here, but it also has a layer mask. So I could select a certain part of the image where I would want the adjustment layer to operate on, and we will see the effect accordingly. When I do click on the adjustment layer, there's a new properties panel that opens up. It has the properties for that particular adjustment. Now, when I selected for brightness and contrast, it came over here by default. So when I increase the brightness, the white colors of the photo increase, and when I increase the contrast, the difference between the whites and the darks also increase. There are a couple of other variations, and these variations will change for every adjustment layer that you're creating. Over here, we have something for auto. And when I do that, it's selected a certain number for brightness and contrast by default. So we've seen how this works, but what is happening right after this? Let's see that. So with the adjustment layer, I have been able to create or change the contrast over here, and I can choose the segment which I would want it to operate on. For this, let's go slightly bold in terms of our decision. Let's say if the brightness is way higher, I would want the sky to be brighter than what it is right now. I can see the original sky is somewhat darker. I would want it to become whiter, but I would also want it to operate only on the sky and not the building. We've already seen how the layer mask works, and for that I will select a brush, and with the large brush that I will paint over the area that I would not want the adjustment layer to be visible. So for this, selecting black color, I wouldn't want the brightness and the contrast to be visible on the lower side of the screen, and I will paint it over there. You can see how this operates. Once I've painted over this area. Now just to remind you, we are operating on the layer mask, and this is not changing the properties of the original image, only on that adjustment layer which has been added as on the top of this. And with that, you can see how the adjustment layer also changed. You can see how the lower area has now been marked in black, which we did over here, and that's how basically the brightness of the image also changed for the sky, for the part which has been marked as white in the layers mask. Now with this, I can always turn this off and see with the original image, I can see how the sky is still brighter when I turn the adjustment layer on or off. I could also change the brightness in case I would want that. This is still doable without any issues. You can lower the contrast and make it slightly coherent with the entire thing, and that's how I have used an adjustment layer. Now there's one more feature about the adjustment layer that we'll be able to see if I have another image visible over here. So for that, let me do this. Let me bring in another image. And let's say we have the woods come back again over here. We've seen this in the previous one as well, where we applied the woods as the background for this entire setup. Setting this up over here, filling the areas I need it. And that way I have the selection over here. Moving the woods layer behind the background. But first I need to unlock the background over here. Double click to change it into a normal layer. Move the woods behind the tree over here. And on this layer, we can again apply a layer mask to hide this blue skies. But before that, let me toggle the layer visibility off for the adjustment layer. Now over here, we know exactly what we're going to do. Click this, select the blue area. We have already set the settings for this earlier. We know that this layer is going to get selected. Negate the area from the car. Inverse the selection because I need to hide this part. So that area should not be visible and only this area should be visible. So if I negate that, now I have just this area that has been selected and apply the layer mask. Now with this, I can see that how this skies have been hidden because of the layer mask, and I can see the woods behind it. Now with this, let's apply the layer one more time. I will click on the cookie icon over here this time around and select brightness and contrast. Now with this brightness and contrast, with the effect working on the entire canvas, if I increase the brightness, we know that the brightness will apply for both the woods and the setup in the front. But this is where the clipping mask comes in handy for the adjustment layer as well. If I again go over here in the layers panel, hold Alt, I get the clipping mask icon, or I can do that directly from the layers panel as well. You can click on this, it applies the adjustment layer only to the layer underneath it and not on the woods. So that basically changes the contrast or the brightness of the image over here and not on the layer which is behind it. So that way I can choose and select only a certain part of the image on which I would want to work and apply the layer mask only on that certain layer. I can also do that with a group of layers in case I have a group. I will leave that exploration up to you. Getting back, we know that we have applied just the brightness and contrast layers over here. We will also go into a couple of other layers which are there for levels, curves, exposure, vibrance, hue, saturation, and a couple of others from this list. We will do that in the next set of videos, so keep an eye out for that. But in the meantime, try out this realize that you've understood there are three types of mask and adjustment layers that you've just seen.